Businesses should see training as an investment rather than a cost. But the accounting team will say the cost of the services needed to support the end user, we've got to train them, but they might go somewhere else. Well, if you don't train them, they will go somewhere else, guaranteed. So it forms part of the total cost of ownership. Maintaining up-to-date software, maintaining up-to-date hardware, and so on. There are ways to mitigate these costs, and we'll look at these shortly, but the total cost of ownership is an important requirement. Input devices in context. Let's have a look at this diagram is the same basically. Data, input, processing, output, two-way communication with storage. Notice there's no reading of data from the storage devices as an input device. Would you expect the keyboard to start talking to you? Or the mouse starting to go, woohoo! It needs human input. So there's one-way communication between the input device and the storage, from the input into storage or into processing. The same with the output devices. You wouldn't expect the output device, such as a screen or a printer, to start talking to the operator or transferring data from the printer into some storage device. It just does not make any intellectual sense, I hope.
It doesn't socialize with anyone.
It doesn't. You know, they're pretty isolated, remote devices. But out of all of this pops information. So, some of the devices we've already mentioned. At the top we've got OCR, optical character recognition. Now you've got a page or a couple of pages of text that you really want to transfer from the page into the computer system. What do? Do you pay someone to type it all up, hoping that that person is a skilled typist and doesn't make mistakes? And then you've got the time factor. Or do you use another technology that is able to read the page and convert that text, the document, into machine readable and editable forms? It's important. It's all very well to say, I can scan it, but OCR allows you to edit as well. I wasn't able to come up with any examples of optical mark recognition, but it reads simple marks on a document. I used to work for Kodak, and you know, they process a lot of printed photographs, and the guillotine would know exactly where to chop without chopping the photograph in half. How did it do that? Well, it used this type of technology. It was able to identify the white space between the prints and say, this is where I should cut. Occasionally when things went wrong, it would cut in the middle, which would destroy your picture. Barcode readers, we spoke about those last week. I've got a couple of examples of these. There are different types of barcode readers. Let's have a look at these. Doesn't fit. Mica, machine readable. Banks process thousands, or used to process thousands, tens of thousands of checks per day. Mica stands for magnetic ink character recognition, and this is the entire character set for mica. Obviously the digits plus a few of these strange characters. And this is formed or appear on the bottom of checks with using magnetic ink. So there's a little bit of iron oxide in the ink itself which can be read. Barcodes, there are different types of barcodes, but we've all seen these, I'm sure. And the other one that we spoke about last week is the QR codes. And again, there are different versions of QR codes. So a QR code is, in a sense, a two-dimensional barcode. Touch screen. Who's got a smartphone? Or who hasn't got a smartphone? Touch screen, of course. It's a pressure-sensitive layer covering the screen of the monitor or a screen itself. By pressing onto the screen, a response is established. My wife, I can't convince her that when she's using a phone that she really needs to put a little bit of pressure on the screen. It's very light touch. And she says, this isn't working. Well, dear, push on the screen a little bit harder. Voice recognition. In the early days, voice recognition would cause a great deal of anguish, frustration, and so on. Tell me the name. You ring up Telstra and you want to get a phone number. Tell me the name of the person. Jones. Did you say Holmes? No, Jones. Phones? No, and you can feel the frustration level of the person increasing. They've improved it. But now, voice recognition, you can also say, look, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a hopeless typist. I used to be able to type at about 60 words a minute, but it's dropped back. But these days, you can say, hello, Google, find me this, or please record this. You can actually read your handwritten notes and it gets typed up, which is a useful feature. Hello Siri, will you do this for me? Etc. Data entry through spoken commands is not just data entry. It can be anything associated. It can be a full document, a text document, or it can be data. So that's voice recognition. Input devices. There are important criteria that we need to consider when selecting an input device. Here we're talking, what do you think volume means here? Is it how loudly you speak? Exactly. The English language is full of ambiguities, unfortunately. Speed, how fast do you need to capture the data? The accuracy, as high as possible. Not much use if your input device, every time you press the letter A, the letter B comes up. Having said that, I had a student years ago, he was nuts. He reprogrammed every key on his handheld device to read something different from what the key illustrated. So if you wanted to type in QWERTY, it might come out as student. I mean, nobody else could use it, and I hope he never forgot what keys he'd assigned. But the point is here, speed and accuracy. You've got to be able, when you press the keys or use an input device, it should be accurately read and reasonably fast. The cost, of course. You'll be dealing with, have you come across the term bean counters? Bean counters are a disparaging description of accountants. They count the money. And they are going to be concerned about cost. You're going to be dealing with accounting personnel to justify new technologies or to justify the replacement of something. So cost is going to be a parameter that will need to be considered. Data complexity. Is it simple data? Is it I think the description there is fairly self-explanatory. How often do you need to use the device, the input device? Key issues. Would you use a mouse as a document input device, typing up letters from a keyboard? You can do it. You can get a simulated keyboard. Click I, don't, D, or click I space, D-O-N apostrophe T. Is that a convenient way of entering text data into a system? Probably not. So you wouldn't use a mouse as an input device, even though they're cheap. You can get a mouse for a couple of dollars, but you wouldn't use a mouse as a primary input device to enter data. And so on. Frequency, how often do you need to use it? Okay, we've seen this diagram time and time again. So now we're looking at output devices. Some of the parameters that you need to consider when recommending an output device. Character-based terminals, we need them. Resolution, it's the fineness of the image. As the resolution increases, so doth the price. So do you really need a super high resolution monitor when you're only dealing with text-based data? It's a choice that needs to be made. But if you're using a lot of visual imagery, then a high resolution monitor may be desirable. The dot pitch, pixel. You all know what the term pixel means?
Same as resolution.
Yeah, but what is it?
Camera pixels.
Yeah. What does the term pixel translate into? It's an abbreviation.
Yeah.
Picture elements. So the dot pitch is the number of picture elements, or number of pixels in a certain area. Distance between the pixels on the screen. The higher the dot pitch, the better the quality of the image, is the answer there. The refresh rate, a method of gauging the frequency, the number of times the image is redrawn on the screen. Not so much of a problem with these monitors, but the early huge television set type monitors, refresh rate was a problem. And sometimes you'd see the image disappear and redrawn line by line, and you think, is this ever going to end? But the refresh rate these days is less of an issue, but it's still there. So the interlaced display, not so much of a problem with these, but in the early television style, big tube televisions, they couldn't display the contents of the screen in one sweep because it would take too long. So they had a double pass, basically, to draw the screen imagery. So these days, those devices are very hard to, I don't think you can buy them anymore. In fact, if you go to a charity shop and say, look, I've got this wonderful monitor, can you give me a hand? It's a bit heavy. Can you give me a hand to bring it into the shop, they will say, no thanks, would you take it down to the tip? They don't want these huge heavy monitors anymore because they're obsolete. They use an interlaced display that basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's how the images are drawn. So you don't see the entire image all the time. Video, non-interlaced displays like these, they appear straight away. So single pass refresh. Video projector, we've got one here. Plotters. Where might you use a plotter? A plotter literally draws one line at a time, a picture or a letter and so on. If you're printing, say you've written a thesis, it might be 60,000 words. Would you seriously consider using a plotter to print your thesis? One line at a time. It would take a very long time. So plotters do have their applications. Where might you find a plotter in an office? And what would the application be? So if you're working in an architect's office where you've got plans of buildings, are you going to use a dot matrix or a laser printer? You could, but the quality would be far better enhanced using a plotter. You can use large format paper, whereas laser printers, inkjet printers, they can get up to about A3, and that's about it. The plotter draws one colour at a time. So if you've got a 3-colour image or a 4-colour image, it draws the colour with one pen, then goes away, grabs another colour, draws in the same line where the colours change, puts that pen back, grabs the third pen, grabs the fourth pen, and so on. Fourth pen, red, green, blue and black, the usual colours. They are quiet. MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, musical synthesis and control of musical instruments. I'm not a musician, so I don't know much about MIDI interfaces, but I'm sure if you're musically inclined, you'd be aware of these technologies. Just a little bit of extra detail on printer types. Printer types are classified in a number of different ways. There's impact printers. Impact printers, and they're still around and they're still in use, still for sale, believe it or not, for some applications. They strike a matrix of pins onto paper, onto an ink ribbon, which transfers the image onto paper. Different types, you can have a pin matrix, you can have what they call a golf ball or a daisy wheel. Daisy wheel and golf balls have formed letters. Formed letters you can't do graphics with formed letters. So there's a restriction there. Pins, using pins, the quality of the print is not as good as other machines, but they are also very noisy and very slow. And there used to be a little cottage industry when these machines were widely in use. Sound boxes. You'd put the print. Yeah. Well, the golf ball and daisy wheel are basically typewriters that are controlled by the computer. Well, typewriters are noisy. Clack, 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 as the printing head strikes the paper, and it meant offices couldn't function comfortably in that environment. However, they are useful when printing multiform sheets. So these days, offices still use multiform sheets. So the top copy goes to the client, the second copy goes to accounts, the third copy goes somewhere else, and the fourth copy is put in the filing cabinet somewhere. So they're still in use. Inkjet printers, they project ionised drops of ink onto paper, and I'm sure you've seen the outputs of inkjet printers. They're quiet, cheap to purchase, but running costs can be high. We get back to this total cost of ownership concept. Good quality, colour capable, and text or graphics capable. So they are very much modern technology. Then we've got lasers. Laser printers are basically photocopiers attached to a computer. In fact, these days you can use a laser printer or even an inkjet printer as a photocopier. Low running costs, mono or colour, text or graphics capable, and their technologies are still in use. Photo printers, highly specialised applications if you want to print high quality photos. Can be limited to, by paper size, and the paper can be relatively expensive, a couple of dollars a sheet. They are expensive to operate, so they would be used in specialised applications. Dye sublimation, these give you very good quality prints using heat transfer methods to transfer ink onto paper. They can print in colour or black and white, and they can print on just about any media. So have a look at your ID card.
We haven't got one.
Yeah, oh, you haven't. Okay. Where did I put mine? Mine's not there. It's probably in there somewhere. The thermal printers, they print. Dye sublimation. They print images onto things like ID cards. Thermal printers, basically dot matrix heating onto special paper. They're very quiet, limited paper, and the graphics outputs are very basic. So where do you see those? Thermal printers, printing banners, someplace even more often visited than that. Would you like a receipt? Click. Yes, out it comes. They're thermal printers at your supermarket checkout. You get a receipt printed using thermal paper. The paper is stable. They're very quiet. You can't hear them operate because there's no physical impacts occurring. But the graphics are pretty awful. You've got black or white, so no grey tones. Plotters we've spoken about. Relatively slow, but this technology is growing in importance, and this is why I've put these extra slides up. 3D printing is a growth area where printers are now layering the printed document into a three-dimensional layer rather than two-dimensional. They're used to make parts. One that horrifies me a bit is you can use a 3D printer to print a gun. Why? Probably a single-use gun, but because the plastic would probably melt. But in an area where they are being used is in medical applications to produce prosthetic limbs. Now, the beauty of 3D printing is you can scan a person's hip joint, get a very precise image of the hip joint, and then print a plastic replacement quite quickly and quite inexpensively. Now, I have a friend who's had 2 hip replacements. One was done with conventional metal, and he said it was a disaster, and the other one's a plastic one, and he said it's brilliant. He was walking within a couple of days. So this is an area where I think we'll see a lot of change.